I walked into the federal building that Tuesday morning, my coffee still steaming, as I prepared for what should have been a routine security briefing. 28 years with the Secret Service had taught me to expect the unexpected, but nothing could have prepared me for what Director Thompson was about to tell me. He sat behind his mahogany desk, his face cold and expressionless as he looked up from his paperwork. My nephew Jake graduated from the academy last month. He's taking over as security lead. Clean out your desk. The words hit me like a physical blow. My Yankee white clearance, my spotless record, my decades of dedicated service. None of it mattered. The elevator ride down to the parking garage felt like a descent into hell. My hands shook as I gripped my cardboard box of personal belongings, trying to process what had just happened. 28 years of my life gone in a single sentence. I had dedicated everything to this job, missed family gatherings, worked holidays, put my life on the line countless times for this country. And for what to be discarded like yesterday's newspaper for some college kid who shared Thompson's DNA. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. Agent Carlos Martinez, my partner for the last 5 years, was calling. His voice was tight with concern when I answered. "Robin, what the hell just happened up there? Word is spreading through the building like wildfire." I slumped against my sedan, feeling the weight of my situation settling in. "Thompson fired me. Said his nephew is taking over security for tomorrow's presidential visit." Even saying it out loud felt surreal. There was a long pause before Martinez spoke again. "Robin, this doesn't make sense. You've got the highest security clearance in the building. The president specifically requested our most experienced agent for this visit. Thompson knows that. Apparently, experience doesn't matter anymore when you're related to the director." The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. Martinez lowered his voice. "Listen, meet me at Sullivan's Diner on 5th Street in an hour. There are things you need to know about what's been happening around here." The hour crawled by as I sat in my apartment staring at the walls that suddenly felt like a prison. My service weapon and badge sat on the kitchen table, symbols of an identity that no longer existed. I had built my entire adult life around protecting others, and now I was just another unemployed federal worker with a mortgage and no prospects. Sullivan's Diner was nearly empty when I arrived. Martinez was already there, hunched over a cup of coffee in a corner booth, his usually confident demeanor replaced by something that looked like fear. He stood when he saw me, his embrace lasting longer than usual. "Robin, I'm so sorry about this morning, but I think there's more going on here than just nepotism." He slid a manila folder across the table. "I've been keeping track of some irregularities lately. Look at this." The folder contained personnel records for 6 senior agents who had been terminated in the past 3 months. All of them had been replaced by young agents with family connections to Thompson or his close associates. Agent Patricia Walsh, 15 years of service, replaced by Thompson's brother-in-law's son. Agent Michael Rodriguez, 12 years with the service, replaced by Thompson's golf buddy's nephew. The pattern was unmistakable. "Carlos, this is systematic." I studied the documents more carefully. "These are all our most experienced people." Walsh had expertise in financial crimes investigation. Rodriguez specialized in white-collar fraud detection. Martinez nodded grimly. "That's not all. I've been hearing whispers about budget discrepancies, equipment purchases that don't match what we actually received, vendor contracts with companies that seem to exist only on paper." A chill ran down my spine as the pieces began falling into place. "You think Thompson is stealing from the agency?" "I think Thompson is cleaning house of anyone with the skills and experience to notice what he's been doing." Martinez leaned forward. "And tomorrow's presidential visit involves a massive security budget allocation, nearly $2 million in emergency funds that Thompson has sole discretion over." The diner's fluorescent lights suddenly felt harsh and unforgiving. Everything made horrible sense now. My firing wasn't about giving his nephew an opportunity. It was about removing the one person with the clearance level and investigative background to spot his scheme. Thompson had played this perfectly, timing my dismissal to coincide with the presidential visit, when everyone would be too busy to question personnel changes. "Carlos, we have to report this." I reached for my phone, but Martinez caught my wrist. "To who Thompson has been very careful about this. All the paperwork looks legitimate. The replaced agents were all given official reasons for termination. Performance issues, failure to meet training standards, personality conflicts. And now you've been fired for insubordination according to the official record he filed this afternoon." My blood ran cold. "Insubordination? I never did anything insubordinate. According to Thompson's report, you've been questioning his leadership, undermining security protocols, and showing signs of instability. He's been building a case against you for months, Robin. False documentation, manufactured incidents, witness statements from agents who probably don't even know what they were signing. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth as I realized the depth of Thompson's planning. This wasn't a spontaneous decision driven by nepotism. This was a calculated elimination of threats to his operation. He had spent months preparing to destroy my credibility before making his move. Tomorrow's presidential visit is his endgame, I said quietly. He'll steal the emergency funds during all the chaos, and by the time anyone notices, he'll be long gone. Martinez's face was grim. And the country will be left with an inexperienced security team protecting the president. Robin, this isn't just about theft anymore. This is a national security nightmare waiting to happen. I stared out the diner window at the evening traffic, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. My career was over, my reputation destroyed, and my attempts to seek justice would likely be dismissed as the rantings of a disgruntled former employee. But somewhere in Washington, the president was preparing for a visit that could put both the nation's leader and millions of dollars at risk. The question was no longer whether I could save my job. It was whether I could find a way to stop Thompson before his greed led to catastrophe. And I had less than 18 hours to figure out how. I spent that night in my home office surrounded by documents, financial records, and every piece of information I could gather about Thompson's activities. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness as I traced vendor payments, cross-referenced personnel files, and built a timeline of the systematic destruction of our security team's expertise. The evidence was damning once you knew what to look for. Thompson had created a network of shell companies owned by relatives and associates, all bidding on security equipment contracts at inflated prices. The pattern went back 2 years, with millions of dollars diverted from legitimate security needs into Thompson's personal network. But the smoking gun was the emergency allocation for tomorrow's presidential visit, $2.3 million in additional security funding that Thompson controlled completely. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m, a text from Martinez. Can't sleep either, found something you need to see. He arrived at my apartment 20 minutes later with a flash drive and a haunted expression. Robin, this is worse than we thought. I managed to access Thompson's office computer remotely. Don't ask how. Look at these files. The documents on the flash drive painted a picture of incredible arrogance and detailed planning. Thompson had been preparing for this moment for months, creating detailed plans for transferring the emergency funds to offshore accounts during tomorrow's visit. He had even prepared resignation letters, dated 3 days after the presidential visit, claiming family emergencies that required him to relocate overseas immediately. Carlos, he's been planning to disappear all along. The presidential visit is just his exit strategy. I scrolled through travel reservations, property purchases in non-extradition countries, and bank account information for multiple international locations. There's more, Martinez said quietly. I also found his insurance policy against exposure. Look at this folder labeled Problem Personnel. My hands trembled as I opened the file containing fabricated evidence against every agent Thompson had fired. Forged training reports, manufactured psychological evaluations, fake witness statements, all designed to destroy the credibility of anyone who might question his actions. My file was the thickest, containing detailed accusations of mental instability, alcohol abuse, and compromised loyalty dating back months. He's been preparing to destroy us all along, I whispered. Even if we try to expose him, he's already poisoned the well against us. The most chilling document was a timeline showing Thompson's awareness of the presidential visit 6 months in advance. He had known this opportunity was coming and had systematically eliminated every agent with the expertise to interfere with his plans. The theft wasn't opportunistic. It was the culmination of a carefully orchestrated campaign. I picked up my phone to call the FBI, but Martinez stopped me. Robin, I already tried that route. Special Agent Johnson from the Financial Crimes Division is an old friend of mine from the Academy. I reached out to him this afternoon thinking we could get federal investigators involved. My stomach dropped. And Thompson got there first. Johnson told me that the FBI received a detailed report from Thompson yesterday afternoon about a potentially unstable former agent making wild accusations about agency leadership. Johnson specifically mentioned your name and suggested I maintain distance from you for my own career protection. The room felt like it was closing in around me. Thompson had anticipated every possible avenue of resistance and had blocked them all in advance. He had turned my own sterling reputation against me, using my dedication and intensity as evidence of obsessive behavior that had crossed into paranoia. "What about internal affairs?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Same story. Thompson submitted a comprehensive report about your declining performance and increasingly erratic behavior. He even included statements from other agents expressing concern about your mental state." Martinez shook his head. "He's been setting this up for months, Robin. Every conversation, every interaction, every moment of frustration you ever showed, he's twisted it all into evidence against you." I sank into my chair, feeling the full weight of Thompson's trap closing around me. He had not only stolen from the agency and compromised national security, he had done it in a way that made me appear to be the real threat. Any attempt I made to expose his crimes would be seen as confirmation of the instability he had so carefully documented. Carlos tomorrow's visit is going to be a disaster. His nephew Jake is completely unprepared for this level of responsibility. I've seen the kid's training records. He barely passed the basic academy requirements. And Thompson's been firing all the experienced agents who could compensate for Jake's inexperience. Martinez nodded grimly. "I tried to talk to Jake this afternoon, thinking maybe I could get him to see reason. The kid is terrified, Robin. He knows he's not qualified for this, but his uncle has convinced him that family loyalty requires him to take the position. Jake's more afraid of disappointing Thompson than he is of failing to protect the president." The implications were staggering. Not only was Thompson planning to steal millions during the visit, but his personnel decisions had created a genuinely dangerous security situation. The president would be protected by an inexperienced team led by an unqualified agent, all while Thompson focused on executing his theft rather than managing security. "We have to find another way," I said, scrolling through the evidence on my laptop. "There has to be someone somewhere who will listen to reason. Robin, I hate to say this, but I think you need to prepare for the possibility that Thompson is going to get away with this. He's covered every angle, eliminated every threat, and positioned himself perfectly. Even if his theft is discovered later, he'll be long gone, and you'll be left holding the blame." I stared at the evidence spread across my desk. Months of careful documentation that would be dismissed as the desperate fabrications of a mentally unstable former employee. Thompson had weaponized my own reputation against me, turning my 28 years of dedicated service into evidence of dangerous obsession. But as I looked at the photos from the presidential advance team's preliminary visit, something crystallized in my mind. This wasn't just about my career anymore, or even about the money Thompson planned to steal. The safety of the President of the United States was hanging in the balance, dependent on a security team that had been deliberately weakened by corruption and nepotism. Thompson might have destroyed my credibility and blocked every official channel for stopping him, but he had made one critical error. He had assumed that discrediting me would be enough to neutralize me. He had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous person is the one with nothing left to lose. Tomorrow's presidential visit was 16 hours away. Thompson's trap was perfect, his planning was flawless, and his escape route was prepared. But I still had one advantage he hadn't considered. I knew exactly what he was planning to do, and I was willing to risk everything to stop him. The question was no longer whether I could save my career. The question was whether I could find a way to save the president and prevent a national security catastrophe, even if it meant sacrificing everything I had left. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I spent the dark hours crafting a desperate plan to reach someone, anyone with the authority to stop Thompson's scheme. By dawn, I had prepared detailed reports for every oversight agency I could think of: the Inspector General's office, the Congressional Oversight Committee, even the White House Security Office itself. My first call was to Inspector General Patricia Morrison, whose office was responsible for investigating fraud within federal agencies. I had worked with Morrison's team on several cases over the years, and I hoped our professional relationship would give my accusations some credibility. Morrison's assistant put me through after a brief hold, but the conversation went downhill immediately. "Agent Carter, I'm surprised to hear from you. We received some concerning reports about your recent behavior from Director Thompson." My heart sank, but I pressed forward. "Ma'am, I'm calling to report evidence of systematic fraud and corruption within the Secret Service. Director Thompson has been embezzling funds and compromising security for the presidential visit." There was a long pause before Morrison responded. Agent Carter, I understand you've been going through some personal difficulties lately. Director Thompson briefed us yesterday about your termination and the circumstances surrounding it. Perhaps you should focus on getting the help you need rather than making unfounded accusations. I tried to explain the evidence Martinez and I had gathered, but Morrison cut me off. Agent Carter, making false accusations against federal officials is a serious crime. I strongly advise you to cease this behavior immediately and seek professional counseling. This conversation is being recorded, and any further harassment of Director Thompson will be referred for prosecution. The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in disbelief. Thompson had not only anticipated my move, he had preemptively destroyed my credibility with the very people who should have been investigating his crimes. My next call was to Congressman Bradley Walsh, chairman of the House Subcommittee on Federal Agency Oversight. Walsh's office had previously praised my work on uncovering procurement fraud, and I hoped he might be willing to listen. But his chief of staff, Jennifer Chen, delivered the same message with bureaucratic efficiency. Mr. Walsh is aware of your situation, Agent Carter. Director Thompson contacted our office yesterday to warn us that you might attempt to make false accusations as retaliation for your termination. The congressman has no interest in being used as a weapon in your personal vendetta against agency leadership. Each call followed the same pattern. Thompson had contacted every possible oversight authority, painting me as an unstable former employee seeking revenge through false accusations. My 28-year record of service meant nothing compared to Thompson's preemptive character assassination. By 10 in the morning, I was down to my last option, the White House Security Office itself. Surely the people responsible for protecting the president would take seriously any threat to his safety, regardless of the source. I called the main number and asked to speak with Security Chief David Anderson, citing urgent security concerns about tomorrow's presidential visit. Anderson's assistant transferred me after a brief delay, and I found myself speaking directly with the man responsible for coordinating presidential protection. Chief Anderson, this is Agent Robin Carter with the Secret Service. I need to report critical security vulnerabilities for tomorrow's visit. Agent Carter. Anderson's voice was cold and professional. I've been expecting your call. Director Thompson briefed me yesterday about your unfortunate situation. I understand you're going through some personal difficulties. I felt the familiar sinking sensation as Thompson's trap closed around me once again. Sir, this isn't about personal difficulties. There's evidence of corruption that's compromising security for the presidential visit. Director Thompson has been embezzling funds and has replaced experienced agents with unqualified relatives. Anderson's sigh was audible over the phone. Agent Carter, your accusations are exactly what Director Thompson predicted you would make. He provided us with detailed documentation of your declining performance and mental state over the past several months. Frankly, your behavior right now is confirming his assessment. Sir, I have evidence. Bank records, vendor contracts, personnel files showing systematic fraud. I was pleading now, hearing the desperation in my own voice. Agent Carter, Director Thompson warned us that you might claim to have fabricated evidence. He explained that your obsessive tendencies and paranoid thinking have led you to see conspiracies where none exist. The evidence you think you have is most likely the product of your own mental instability. The conversation ended with Anderson warning me that any attempt to interfere with the presidential visit would result in federal charges. I sat in my apartment, staring at the phone, feeling completely isolated and powerless. Thompson's psychological warfare had been perfect. He had turned my own reputation and personality against me, making my warnings seem like the rantings of someone suffering a mental breakdown. I turned on the news, hoping to find some other angle for exposing Thompson's scheme. Instead, I saw Thompson himself being interviewed by Channel 7 News about security preparations for the presidential visit. He appeared calm, professional, and completely trustworthy as he discussed the comprehensive measures being taken to ensure the president's safety. We have our most experienced team in place, Thompson told the reporter, his face radiating confidence and authority. Agent Jake Thompson, my nephew, is leading the security detail. Despite his youth, he's shown exceptional promise and dedication to protecting our nation's leaders. The reporter asked about recent personnel changes, and Thompson's response was masterful. We've made some difficult but necessary adjustments to our team. Unfortunately, we had to terminate a longtime agent whose performance had deteriorated significantly. It's never easy to let someone go, especially when they've served for many years, but the president's safety must come first. I watched in horror as Thompson painted himself as a dedicated public servant, making tough decisions for national security while subtly confirming the narrative he had spread about my supposed instability. The interview was perfectly calculated to reinforce his credibility while undermining any accusations I might make. My phone rang, startling me out of my focus on the television. Martinez's voice was tense and urgent. "Robin, we've got problems. Jake called in sick this morning, claiming he's having panic attacks about tomorrow's responsibility. Thompson is scrambling to find a replacement, but half the experienced agents are out on other assignments, and the other half were fired over the past few months. Carlos, this is spiraling into exactly the disaster we predicted. The security team is falling apart. Thompson's focused on his theft instead of protection, and no one in authority will listen to warnings about the situation. It gets worse," Martinez continued. "I overheard Thompson on a phone call this morning, arranging some kind of meeting during tomorrow's visit. He's planning to execute the theft while everyone's distracted by the presidential arrival. And Robin, there's something else. I think he knows we've been investigating him." My blood ran cold. "What makes you think that—" Security came by my office this morning asking questions about my computer usage. They specifically asked about after-hours access and file transfers. Thompson's covering his tracks, and I think he's preparing to throw me under the bus too. I realized that Thompson's trap extended beyond just me. He was prepared to sacrifice anyone who might threaten his scheme. Martinez's career was now in jeopardy simply because he had tried to help me uncover the truth. Thompson's corruption was spreading like a cancer, destroying everyone who came into contact with it. "Carlos, you need to distance yourself from this situation. Thompson's already destroyed my credibility, and I won't let him do the same to you." The words tasted bitter, but I knew they were true. "Robin, I can't just abandon you. This is bigger than our careers. The president's safety is at stake." I stared out my apartment window at the federal building where I had spent the best years of my life. Somewhere in that building, Thompson was putting the finishing touches on a scheme that would steal millions of dollars and potentially put the president at risk. He had outmaneuvered me at every turn, anticipated every possible response, and turned the very system I had served against me. But as I watched the afternoon shadows lengthen, I realized that Thompson's perfection might also be his weakness. He had planned for every official response, every bureaucratic channel, every authority figure who might investigate his crimes. What he might not have planned for was a desperate former agent with nothing left to lose and no remaining faith in official channels. Tomorrow's presidential visit was 18 hours away. Thompson's theft was imminent, the security team was compromised, and everyone with authority had dismissed my warnings. But somewhere in Thompson's perfect plan, there had to be a weakness, a moment when his focus on stealing would leave him vulnerable to exposure. I picked up my phone and dialed Martinez one more time. "Carlos, I need you to stay as far away from this as possible, but if you're willing to take one last risk, there might be a way to stop Thompson that he never saw coming." The plan forming in my mind was desperate, dangerous, and would probably destroy what little remained of my reputation. But as I looked at the evidence of Thompson's crimes spread across my desk, I realized that some things were more important than personal consequences. The integrity of the Secret Service and the safety of the president were worth any sacrifice I might have to make. Thompson thought he had won by destroying my credibility and blocking every official avenue for stopping him. But he had forgotten that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one who has already lost everything and has nothing left to lose. I woke at 5 in the morning on the day of the presidential visit, my stomach churning with anxiety and determination. The plan I had developed overnight was risky beyond measure, but it was the only option left that Thompson hadn't anticipated. If I was going to stop his scheme, it would have to be through direct confrontation during the chaos of the presidential arrival. Martinez had agreed to help with one final gambit. He would monitor Thompson's activities from inside the building and alert me to the exact timing of the theft attempt. Meanwhile, I would position myself near the federal building to observe and document Thompson's crimes as they occurred. The evidence might not save my career, but it could prevent Thompson from escaping with the money. I dressed in my best suit, pinned my old Secret Service pin to my lapel, and gathered every piece of evidence I had compiled. If this was going to be my last act as a federal agent, I wanted to look the part. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was about to risk arrest and prosecution in order to protect the very system that had rejected my warnings. The federal building was buzzing with activity when I arrived at 7 in the morning. Secret Service agents, local police, and federal marshals were conducting final security sweeps and establishing perimeters. I parked 3 blocks away and walked toward the building, staying far enough back to avoid immediate recognition, while close enough to observe the preparations. My phone buzzed with a text from Martinez. Jake called in completely sick. Panic attacks all night. Thompson promoting Agent Williams to lead security. Williams has 6 months experience total. This is a nightmare. I watched through binoculars as Thompson himself appeared in the building's main entrance, directing agents and speaking urgently into his radio. Even from a distance, I could see the stress in his body language. His perfect plan was falling apart due to his nephew's breakdown, and he was struggling to maintain control while simultaneously preparing to execute his theft. At 8:30, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. Agent Carter, this is Detective Sarah Morgan with Metropolitan Police. We need to speak with you immediately regarding some serious accusations that have been made against you. My heart pounded as I realized Thompson's final trap was closing. Detective, I'm not sure what you've been told, but I'm willing to answer any questions you might have. Agent Carter, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of threatening federal officials and attempting to compromise presidential security. Where are you currently located? I closed my eyes, feeling Thompson's perfect planning reach its climax. He had anticipated that I might try to observe the presidential visit and had arranged for my arrest to prevent any interference. Detective, I'm near the federal building, but I can explain everything if you'll just listen. Agent Carter, I need you to remain where you are. We're sending units to your location now. Do not attempt to approach the federal building or interfere with security operations. 3 police cars appeared at the end of the block, moving slowly as they searched for me. I had perhaps 2 minutes before they spotted me and ended any chance of stopping Thompson's scheme. But as I prepared to surrender, my phone buzzed with an urgent text from Martinez. Emergency. Thompson accessing financial systems now. Transfer in progress. Presidential advance team arrived early, asking for agent with Yankee white clearance. Jake nowhere to be found. Security team in complete chaos. I stared at my phone, realizing that Thompson's moment of maximum vulnerability had arrived ahead of schedule. He was executing his theft right now, while the presidential advance team was discovering that the security arrangements were completely compromised. If I could reach the building and expose his crimes in front of federal witnesses, his perfect plan would collapse. The police cars were getting closer, and I could see officers scanning the area with binoculars. But between me and certain arrest lay the opportunity to stop Thompson and potentially save both the stolen money and the president's security. I had seconds to make a decision that would determine everything. I pulled out my phone and called Detective Morgan back. Detective, I need to speak with you in person. There's evidence of federal crimes occurring right now that I can prove to you. Can you meet me at the corner of 5th and Main? I'll surrender to you there, but you need to hear what I have to say. There was a pause before Morgan responded. Agent Carter, you're in enough trouble already. Don't make this worse by trying to flee or resist arrest. Detective, I'm not fleeing. I'm trying to prevent a crime that's happening right now. Please, just give me 5 minutes to show you the evidence. If you don't believe me after that, I'll surrender without resistance. I started walking toward the corner I had mentioned, my heart pounding as I calculated the timing. If Morgan was willing to listen, I might be able to convince her that Thompson's charges against me were fabricated. And if I could gain the assistance of a police detective, I might have the credibility I needed to expose Thompson's crimes to federal authorities. The police car that pulled up at the corner contained a woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and a skeptical expression. Detective Morgan stepped out of her vehicle, her hand resting casually on her weapon as she approached me. Agent Carter, I assume you've caused quite a stir this morning. Detective, thank you for meeting with me. I know how this looks, but I need you to examine some evidence before you arrest me. The charges against me are fabricated by the very person who's committing federal crimes right now. Morgan's expression suggested she had heard similar claims from countless suspects over the years. Agent Carter, I've read the reports about your behavior. Director Thompson provided very detailed documentation about your mental state and the threats you've made. The evidence against you seems pretty solid. I pulled out the flash drive containing all the evidence Martinez and I had gathered. Detective, just look at this information. Financial records, vendor contracts, personnel files, everything proving that Thompson has been embezzling from the Secret Service for 2 years. The theft he's planning today is just the culmination of his scheme. Morgan took the flash drive reluctantly, her expression still skeptical. Agent Carter, even if there were some irregularities in agency finances, that doesn't justify the threats you've made or the security concerns you've raised. What threats? I asked. Detective, I never threatened anyone. Thompson fabricated those charges to prevent me from exposing his crimes. Check the warrant. I'll bet the supposed threats are vague and unprovable, because they never actually happened. For the first time, Morgan's expression showed a hint of uncertainty. She pulled out her phone and made a quick call, presumably checking the details of the charges against me. As she spoke quietly to someone at headquarters, I watched the federal building in the distance, knowing that Thompson was executing his theft at this very moment. Agent Carter, Morgan said after ending her call. The warrant is legitimate, but you're right that the details are somewhat vague. The accusations are based primarily on Director Thompson's reports rather than independent evidence. Why should I believe your version of events instead of his? I pointed toward the federal building. Detective, because his version of events doesn't explain why he fired 6 experienced agents in 3 months and replaced them all with inexperienced relatives. It doesn't explain why he's accessing financial systems during a presidential visit instead of focusing on security. And it doesn't explain why his nephew, who was supposed to lead today's security detail, had a complete breakdown and can't be found. Morgan followed my gaze toward the building where the activity seemed more frantic than organized. Even from our distance, it was clear that something was wrong with the security preparations. Agent Carter, how do you know all this is happening right now? Because I still have contacts inside who are concerned about what Thompson's been doing. Detective, I spent 28 years building a reputation for integrity and dedication. Do you really think I would throw that all away to make false accusations against my former boss? Morgan studied my face carefully, and I could see her training as a detective taking over from her initial skepticism. Agent Carter, if what you're saying is true, why haven't federal authorities investigated these claims? Because Thompson got to them first. He spent months building a case against me documenting supposed signs of mental instability and erratic behavior. By the time I tried to report his crimes, my credibility had already been destroyed. Every agency I contacted had already been warned that I was an unstable former employee seeking revenge. I pulled out my phone and showed Morgan the text messages from Martinez. Detective, these are real-time updates from inside the building. Thompson is executing his theft right now during the presidential visit because he knows everyone will be too distracted to notice until it's too late. Morgan read the messages, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. Agent Carter, if you're lying to me, you're facing serious federal charges for interfering with presidential security. And if I'm telling the truth, we're watching a federal crime in progress while the president's safety is being compromised by corruption and nepotism. I met her eyes directly. Detective, my career is already over. My reputation is already destroyed. I have nothing to gain by lying to you and everything to lose by being wrong. But the president arrives in 90 minutes and Thompson's theft is happening right now. Morgan stared at the federal building for a long moment, then made a decision that would change everything. Agent Carter, I'm going to take a chance on you. But if this goes wrong, we're both going to face serious consequences. Get in the car. As we drove toward the federal building, I realized that Detective Morgan's willingness to listen might be the break I needed to stop Thompson. But we were racing against time with the presidential arrival approaching and Thompson's theft already in progress. The next hour would determine whether justice would prevail or whether Thompson's perfect crime would succeed despite everything I had sacrificed to stop it. The federal building loomed ahead, bustling with security preparations that masked the corruption occurring within. Thompson thought he had eliminated every threat to his scheme, but he hadn't counted on a police detective willing to question official narratives and a desperate former agent with nothing left to lose. Detective Morgan's police car cut through traffic with its emergency lights flashing as we raced toward the federal building. My phone was buzzing constantly with updates from Martinez, each message more urgent than the last. Thompson's financial transfers were accelerating. The security team was in complete disarray, and the presidential advance team was demanding immediate answers about the agency's preparedness. Agent Carter, Morgan said, as she navigated through the security perimeter. I want you to understand that I'm taking an enormous risk here. If your accusations turn out to be false, both of our careers are over. Detective, I appreciate the chance you're giving me, but look at that building. Does the security preparation look normal to you? I pointed toward the federal entrance where agents were running back and forth in obvious confusion, rather than maintaining the calm professionalism typical of presidential security operations. Morgan's trained eye picked up on the same details I was observing. You're right. That looks more like crisis management than standard security protocol. How long have you been watching this situation develop? Since Thompson fired me 2 days ago. But the corruption has been building for 2 years. He's been systematically replacing experienced agents with unqualified relatives, stealing from security budgets, and positioning himself for this final theft during the presidential visit. My phone buzzed with another message from Martinez. Presidential advance team furious, demanding immediate meeting with agent in charge with Yankee White clearance. Thompson pointing to Agent Williams, who obviously doesn't have required clearance. Advance team threatening to cancel presidential visit. Thompson panicking but still accessing financial systems. I showed the message to Morgan, whose expression grew increasingly grim. Agent Carter, if the presidential visit is canceled due to security concerns, that's a national embarrassment. But if it proceeds with compromised security, that's a national danger. That's exactly why Thompson's scheme is so devastating. He's not just stealing money, he's compromised the entire security infrastructure. The advance team knows something's wrong, but they don't understand the full scope of Thompson's corruption. Morgan pulled her car into the federal building's loading dock, bypassing the main security checkpoint. Agent Carter, we're going to walk into that building together. You're going to show me exactly what Thompson is doing, and I'm going to verify your claims with my own eyes. If you're right, I'll back you up with federal authorities. If you're wrong, I'll arrest you myself. The loading dock was buzzing with activity as maintenance crews prepared the building for the presidential arrival. Secret Service agents were directing final security sweeps, while federal marshals coordinated with local police. In the midst of all this activity, I spotted Thompson emerging from a service elevator, his face flushed and his normally perfect appearance disheveled. There he is, I whispered to Morgan. Look at his body language. That's not a man confidently managing security preparations. That's someone under enormous stress trying to juggle too many deceptions at once. Morgan observed Thompson's erratic movements as he rushed between different areas of the building, speaking urgently into his phone rather than coordinating with his security team. Agent Carter, you're right that his behavior seems unusual, but that could be explained by the pressure of managing a presidential visit. Detective watch who he's talking to. Notice that he's not coordinating with the advance team or the other security agencies. He's making private phone calls while his agents struggle to maintain security protocols without proper leadership. My phone buzzed again. Urgent advance team demanding immediate explanation for personnel changes. Thompson claims experienced agents were fired for performance issues, but can't provide documentation. Team lead asking for your contact information to verify Thompson's claims. What should I tell them? I showed the message to Morgan and watched her expression change as she realized the implications. Detective, the advance team is starting to question Thompson's version of events. If I could speak with them directly, I could provide the evidence they need to understand what's really happening. Agent Carter approaching the advance team could be seen as interfering with federal security operations. But if they're actively seeking information about the personnel changes, that might give us legitimate grounds for contact. Before I could respond, we both heard raised voices from the main security office. Through the building's glass walls, we could see Thompson in heated discussion with 2 men in suits who were clearly federal agents. One of them was gesturing angrily while Thompson appeared to be making excuses. That's the advance team, I told Morgan. They've discovered that the security arrangements don't meet presidential protection standards. Thompson's trying to convince them that everything's under control, but his inexperienced team can't answer their technical questions. Morgan made a decision. Agent Carter, we're going to walk into that office. I'm going to identify myself as a police detective investigating potential federal crimes, and you're going to present your evidence to the advance team. If Thompson tries to have you arrested, I'll verify that you're cooperating with a legitimate police investigation. We approached the security office just as the argument inside was reaching its peak. The advance team leader, a tall man with silver hair and an authoritative bearing, was clearly frustrated with Thompson's responses. Director Thompson, the president, arrives in 45 minutes, and your security team can't answer basic questions about threat assessment protocols. Where is the agent in charge with Yankee White clearance that we were promised? Thompson pointed desperately toward Agent Williams, a young man who looked terrified. Agent Williams has been briefed on all necessary protocols. He's fully qualified to handle today's security requirements. The advanced team leader studied Williams for a moment, then shook his head. Director Thompson, this agent clearly doesn't have the experience level required for presidential protection. We were specifically told that your most experienced agent would be leading today's security detail. Where is Agent Robin Carter? I felt Morgan's encouraging hand on my shoulder as we stepped into the office. Thompson's face went white when he saw me, but before he could speak, Morgan held up her badge. Detective Sarah Morgan, Metropolitan Police. I'm conducting an investigation into allegations of federal crimes, and Agent Carter is cooperating as a witness. The advanced team leader looked between Thompson and me, clearly sensing the tension in the room. Agent Carter, I'm Special Agent David Harrison with the White House Security Office. Director Thompson told us that you were terminated for performance issues, but we need answers about the security preparations for today's visit. Thompson stepped forward, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Agent Harrison, Agent Carter was terminated for mental instability and insubordination. She's been making false accusations as retaliation for her firing. Detective Morgan has been deceived by a disturbed former employee. I met Agent Harrison's eyes, directly drawing on 28 years of professional credibility. Agent Harrison, I was terminated because I discovered Director Thompson's embezzlement scheme. He's been stealing from agency budgets for 2 years and fired experienced agents to prevent discovery of his crimes. Right now, during this presidential visit, he's in the process of stealing over $2 million in emergency security funds. Harrison's expression sharpened with interest. Agent Carter, those are serious accusations. Do you have evidence to support these claims? Before I could respond, my phone rang. Martinez's voice was frantic when I answered. Robin Thompson just locked down the financial systems. He's completed the transfer and is trying to erase the digital trail, but I managed to screenshot the transaction records before the system went dark. He just stole $2.3 million from the presidential security budget. I put the phone on speaker so everyone in the room could hear Martinez's report. Agent Harrison, Agent Martinez, is currently monitoring Thompson's computer activity from inside the building. The theft is happening right now during your investigation. Thompson's composure finally cracked completely. Agent Carter, you're interfering with federal security operations during a presidential visit. Agent Harrison, we demand that you have her arrested immediately for threatening national security. But Agent Harrison was no longer listening to Thompson. He was studying the flash drive of evidence that Detective Morgan had handed him, cross-referencing the financial records with the timing of personnel changes. Director Thompson, these documents suggest a pattern of financial irregularities coinciding with the termination of experienced agents. How do you explain these discrepancies? Thompson looked around the room, desperately realizing that his perfect plan was collapsing in front of federal witnesses. Agent Harrison, you're being deceived by fabricated evidence created by a mentally unstable former employee. Agent Carter has been harassing me for days with these false accusations. Detective Morgan stepped forward with her own evidence. Agent Harrison, the arrest warrant for Agent Carter was based solely on Director Thompson's accusations with no independent verification. Moreover, Agent Carter voluntarily surrendered to me this morning and has been cooperating fully with my investigation into these allegations. Agent Harrison's radio crackled with an urgent message. Advanced team presidential arrival, delayed 15 minutes due to security concerns at destination. Please confirm readiness status immediately. The room fell silent as everyone realized the implications. The president's safety was hanging in the balance, while Thompson's corruption scheme played out in real time. Harrison looked around the room, taking in Thompson's obvious panic, my documented evidence, and Detective Morgan's police investigation. Director Thompson, Harrison said finally, I'm temporarily suspending today's security operations pending immediate investigation of these allegations. Agent Carter, I need you to walk me through every piece of evidence you've gathered. Detective Morgan, I need your department to secure all financial records and computer systems immediately. Thompson made one last desperate attempt to regain control. Agent Harrison, you're making a terrible mistake. Agent Carter is a disturbed individual seeking revenge against the agency that fired her. You're compromising presidential security based on the fabricated accusations of a mentally unstable former employee. But Harrison was already coordinating with federal investigators, and Detective Morgan was calling for additional police units to secure the building. Thompson's perfect plan had finally encountered a situation he hadn't anticipated. honest law enforcement officers willing to investigate his crimes despite his efforts to discredit the accusers. As Thompson watched his scheme unravel before his eyes, I realized that his fatal flaw had been assuming that destroying my credibility would be enough to protect him. He had forgotten that the truth has a way of emerging when people are willing to look past official narratives and examine the evidence for themselves. The presidential visit was in crisis. Millions of dollars were at stake, and Thompson's corruption was finally being exposed. But we had reached this moment only because a police detective was willing to question official accusations and federal agents were willing to prioritize truth over convenience. Thompson's checkmate was about to become his downfall. The next 30 minutes transformed the federal building's security office into the epicenter of a rapidly expanding investigation. Agent Harrison immediately contacted FBI financial crimes specialists, while Detective Morgan coordinated with federal marshals to secure all of Thompson's computer systems and financial records. Thompson stood in the center of the chaos, watching his carefully constructed empire crumble around him. My phone buzzed with updates from Martinez, who had been monitoring the situation from his position inside the building. FBI agents just entered Thompson's office with computer forensics equipment. They're imaging his hard drives and accessing all financial systems. Thompson's assistant is being interviewed separately. The whole building is buzzing with investigators. Agent Harrison studied the evidence I had provided, cross-referencing financial records with personnel changes and security protocols. His expression grew darker with each revelation. Agent Carter, this evidence suggests systematic fraud spanning 2 years. Director Thompson hasn't just stolen money. He's compromised the entire security infrastructure of this agency. Detective Morgan was coordinating with federal investigators who were arriving by the minute. Agent Harrison, we've secured Thompson's computer systems and begun tracing the financial transfers that occurred this morning. The preliminary evidence supports Agent Carter's accusations completely. Thompson made one final desperate attempt to control the narrative. Agent Harrison, you're destroying the security of this operation based on fabricated evidence from a vindictive former employee. Agent Carter has been obsessed with undermining my leadership since I took necessary disciplinary action against her poor performance. But Agent Harrison had already seen too much evidence to accept Thompson's explanations. Director Thompson, the financial records show systematic diversions of security funds to companies owned by your relatives. The personnel files document the termination of experienced agents, followed immediately by the hiring of unqualified family members. And the timing of this morning's financial transfers during the presidential visit suggests deliberate exploitation of operational chaos. Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Lisa Rodriguez arrived with a team of financial crimes investigators. Her briefing with Agent Harrison lasted only minutes before she approached Thompson with handcuffs. Director Thompson, you're under arrest for embezzlement of federal funds fraud and conspiracy to commit theft of government property. Thompson's face went ashen as the handcuffs clicked into place. This is a mistake. Agent Carter has poisoned your investigation with false evidence. I've served this agency with distinction for 15 years. Agent Rodriguez read Thompson his rights, while federal marshals secured his personal effects. Director Thompson, your service record is irrelevant when weighed against evidence of systematic corruption. Agent Carter's accusations have been corroborated by computer forensics financial records and witness statements from multiple sources. As Thompson was led away, Agent Williams approached Agent Harrison with obvious relief. Sir, I need to confess something. Director Thompson pressured me to accept the security lead position despite my lack of experience. I've been terrified about today's responsibility because I knew I wasn't qualified for presidential protection duties. Agent Harrison's expression softened slightly. Agent Williams, your honesty is appreciated. The security arrangements for today will be handled by experienced agents from our advance team. You won't be held responsible for Director Thompson's poor decisions regarding personnel assignments. Detective Morgan pulled me aside as federal investigators continued securing evidence throughout the building. Agent Carter, I owe you an apology. When I first received that arrest warrant this morning, I assumed you were just another disgruntled employee making false accusations. Your willingness to present evidence and cooperate with investigation convinced me to look beyond the official narrative. I shook my head. Detective, you took an enormous professional risk by listening to my accusations instead of simply executing the arrest warrant. If you had followed standard procedure, Thompson would have completed his theft and disappeared before anyone discovered the extent of his crimes. Agent Harrison joined our conversation, his expression mixing relief with concern. Agent Carter, your actions this morning prevented both a significant theft of federal funds and a potential security disaster for the presidential visit. However, the damage to agency operations will take months to repair. The reality of the situation was sobering. Thompson's systematic destruction of the agency's experienced personnel had left massive gaps in institutional knowledge and operational capability. His corruption had compromised not just financial integrity, but the fundamental mission of protecting national leaders. Agent Harrison, I said my primary concern was preventing the theft and ensuring the president's safety. The agency will recover from Thompson's damage, but the precedent of allowing corruption to compromise security operations could have had lasting national consequences. Agent Rodriguez returned from processing Thompson's arrest to brief us on the investigation's scope. Agent Carter, preliminary analysis of Director Thompson's computer systems reveals evidence of fraud dating back 3 years. The total amount stolen appears to exceed $5 million, with today's attempted theft representing his planned final score before fleeing the country. I felt a mixture of vindication and sadness as the full extent of Thompson's betrayal became clear. He had not only stolen money, but had systematically undermined an institution dedicated to protecting the nation's leaders. His corruption had infected every aspect of the agency's operations, from personnel decisions to financial management to operational security. My phone buzzed with a call from Martinez. Robin, the FBI, wants to interview me about Thompson's activities and the evidence we gathered. But more importantly, Agent Harrison wants to speak with you about the presidential visit security arrangements. They need someone with Yankee White clearance to coordinate with the advance team. The irony was overwhelming. Thompson had fired me to prevent my interference with his theft, but his actions had created exactly the security crisis that required my expertise to resolve. The presidential visit that was supposed to be his perfect cover had become the venue for exposing his crimes. Agent Harrison approached me with a formal expression. Agent Carter, the presidential visit has been delayed pending security review, but it will proceed this afternoon with enhanced protocols. Given your clearance level and intimate knowledge of the agency's current situation, would you be willing to assist in coordinating security arrangements? I looked around the building where I had spent the best years of my career, now crawling with federal investigators documenting the corruption that had nearly destroyed everything I had worked to protect. Thompson was in federal custody, his scheme had been exposed, and his victims were beginning the long process of rebuilding their damaged institution. Agent Harrison, I'll do whatever is necessary to ensure the president's safety and help restore integrity to this agency. My voice carried the weight of 28 years of dedication to public service and the hard-earned wisdom of someone who had seen corruption challenged and defeated. Detective Morgan smiled as she concluded her evidence collection. Agent Carter, I've seen a lot of cases where institutional corruption seemed impossible to challenge. What made the difference here was your willingness to risk everything to expose the truth, even when official channels had been compromised. As federal investigators continued their work throughout the building, I realized that Thompson's greatest error had been underestimating the power of truth when people are willing to fight for it. He had assumed that destroying my credibility would be sufficient protection for his crimes. But he had forgotten that evidence speaks louder than accusations, and integrity ultimately triumphs over corruption. The presidential visit would proceed safely, the stolen funds would be recovered, and the agency would begin the difficult process of rebuilding under honest leadership. Thompson's checkmate had indeed arrived, but not in the way he had planned. Justice had finally caught up with his perfect crime. 3 weeks later, I sat in a conference room at the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C., waiting for a meeting that would determine the direction of the rest of my career. The past month had been a whirlwind of federal investigations, congressional hearings, and media attention as Thompson's corruption scheme unraveled completely under federal scrutiny. The final tally was staggering. Thompson had stolen over $6 million across 3 years, systematically weakened the Secret Service through nepotistic hiring practices, and come within hours of escaping the country with his final theft. FBI financial crimes investigators had traced his money through multiple offshore accounts and recovered nearly 90% of the stolen funds. Agent Harrison entered the conference room with a woman I didn't recognize, Deputy Director Patricia Walsh from the Department of Homeland Security. Her presence suggested this meeting would address issues far beyond just my personal situation. Agent Carter, Deputy Director Walsh began, your actions during the Thompson investigation have highlighted serious weaknesses in federal agency oversight. The fact that such extensive corruption could operate undetected for 3 years represents a systemic failure that requires immediate attention. Agent Harrison opened a folder containing what appeared to be an official offer letter. Agent Carter, we've been authorized to offer you a new position within the federal security apparatus. The role is Director of Internal Security Oversight, a newly created position with authority to investigate corruption and misconduct across all agencies responsible for national security. I stared at the documents, trying to process the unexpected turn my career was taking. Deputy Director Walsh, I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure I understand the scope of this position. Walsh leaned forward, her expression serious. Agent Carter Thompson's corruption succeeded because there was no independent oversight of agency leadership. Directors had virtually unlimited authority over personnel and financial decisions, with minimal external review. Your new role would provide direct oversight of all security agency operations, with authority to investigate irregularities and recommend corrective action. The position description outlined responsibilities that went far beyond anything I had imagined. Direct access to all agency financial records, authority to review personnel decisions, power to initiate investigations without requiring permission from agency leadership, and a reporting structure that bypassed traditional bureaucratic channels. Agent Carter, Agent Harrison added, this position carries significant authority and substantial salary increase. More importantly, it provides the tools necessary to prevent future corruption like Thompson's scheme. You would have the power to protect institutional integrity on a national scale. I thought about the past month's revelations and the damage that Thompson's corruption had inflicted on the Secret Service. His systematic destruction of experienced personnel had created security vulnerabilities that would take years to fully address. His financial theft had diverted resources from critical security operations. Most importantly, his abuse of authority had undermined public trust in the institutions responsible for protecting national leaders. Deputy Director Walsh, this position would involve investigating colleagues and challenging agency leadership when necessary. That's not going to make me popular within the federal law enforcement community. Walsh nodded. Agent Carter popularity isn't the objective here. Integrity is. Your willingness to challenge corruption despite personal and professional costs demonstrates exactly the character required for this responsibility. The federal security apparatus needs someone who values truth over politics and institutional integrity over personal convenience. I signed the offer letter, accepting the position with full understanding of its challenges and importance. The role would require me to be constantly vigilant against the kind of corruption that had nearly destroyed my career and compromised national security. But it also provided the authority to prevent future Thompson-like schemes from taking root. 6 months later, I stood before a new class of Secret Service Academy graduates, delivering a lecture on institutional integrity and ethical leadership. Thompson was serving an 8-year federal sentence for corruption and fraud. Agent Williams had completed additional training and developed into a competent agent under proper supervision. Agent Martinez had been promoted to a supervisory role, his loyalty and courage during the Thompson investigation earning him well-deserved recognition. The badge you wear represents more than just law enforcement authority, I told the new graduates. It represents a sacred trust between you and the American people. That trust can be destroyed in a moment by corruption, but it can only be maintained through constant vigilance and unwavering commitment to integrity. One young agent raised her hand. Director Carter, how do we know when to challenge authority if we suspect wrongdoing? The system seems designed to discourage questioning leadership decisions. I thought about my own journey from respected agent to suspected troublemaker to federal investigator. Agent Thompson, the system is indeed designed to maintain order and hierarchy. But no system is perfect, and no authority is beyond question. When you see evidence of corruption or misconduct, you have a responsibility to report it through proper channels. If those channels fail, you may need to find alternative ways to ensure the truth is heard. Another graduate asked, Director Carter, what if reporting corruption destroys your career? How do you balance personal consequences against institutional responsibility? The question struck at the heart of my experience with Thompson's scheme. The answer is that some things are more important than individual careers. The integrity of our institutions, the safety of those we protect, and the trust of the American people are all more valuable than any single person's professional advancement. Sometimes doing the right thing requires accepting personal sacrifice for the greater good. After the lecture, I returned to my office to review investigation reports from across the federal security apparatus. My team had uncovered 3 potential corruption schemes in their early stages, preventing them from reaching the level of Thompson's systematic fraud. The oversight mechanisms we had implemented were working, but vigilance remained essential. Agent Martinez stopped by my office that afternoon with updates on the ongoing reforms within the Secret Service. Robin, the new personnel review protocols are working well. We've identified several agents who were promoted beyond their competence during Thompson's tenure, and we're providing them with additional training rather than termination. The agency is slowly rebuilding its culture of excellence. I looked out my office window at the federal buildings where dedicated agents were working to protect the nation's leaders. Thompson's corruption had taught us that institutional integrity requires constant maintenance, and that good people must be willing to challenge wrongdoing, regardless of personal consequences. Carlos, the most important lesson from the Thompson case is that corruption thrives in darkness and withers under scrutiny. Our job is to ensure that no future Thompson can operate with impunity, regardless of their position or authority. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, I reflected on the journey that had brought me from the brink of career destruction to a position of significant responsibility and authority. Thompson's attempt to destroy my credibility had ultimately led to the exposure of his own crimes and the creation of oversight mechanisms that would protect institutional integrity for years to come. The presidential visit that Thompson had planned to use as cover for his final theft had instead become the venue for his downfall. His perfect crime had been undone by the very qualities he had tried to suppress: integrity, courage, and commitment to truth over convenience. I thought about the question I would ask my YouTube audience. Have you ever faced a situation where doing the right thing required risking everything you had worked for? How did you find the courage to challenge authority when it seemed like the system was stacked against you? The experience had taught me that individual courage can overcome institutional corruption when people are willing to stand up for truth, regardless of personal consequences. Thompson's scheme had seemed perfect because he had anticipated every official response and blocked every bureaucratic channel. But he had failed to account for the power of evidence, the importance of allies willing to take risks, and the ultimate triumph of integrity over corruption. Thank you for following this journey with me. Stories like these remind us that justice sometimes requires ordinary people to make extraordinary sacrifices for the greater good. Please like this video. If you believe in the power of truth over corruption, subscribe for more stories about courage in the face of adversity. Share this with anyone who needs to be reminded that integrity matters, and comment below with your own experiences of standing up for what's right when it wasn't easy. I hope this story inspires you to be vigilant against corruption in your own life and to have the courage to speak truth to power when necessary. Remember that the institutions we depend on for safety and security are only as strong as the integrity of the people who serve within them. Until next time, stay strong, stay honest, and never forget that sometimes the right choice is the difficult choice.